Hi, my name's Sue. I'm here with Cancer Stories. Please watch my video to see how I've dealt with my cancer in a positive manner and kept doing all the funny things in life that I did before. Take a look at my video now. Hi, I'm Sue. I'm a mum of two. Been me and my two girls on our own most of our lives. So we've sampled lots of different things, scuba diving, wall climbing. The girls have done dance. I've always gone to the gym. I've worked full time, so there's been a lot of juggling the activities together. So we've always had very busy lives. I've got two brothers. I spend a lot of time with one of my brothers. And also a lot of family gatherings with my mum and dad and my brother and his wife and boys as well. And then in 2012 I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Sue, thanks for coming in today. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to talk today about your diagnosis, your cancer diagnosis, and in particular your breast cancer diagnosis, which was 2012?
Yes.
First of all, how did that come about? How was the diagnosis picked up?
I found a lump, and for 2 months I just monitored it thinking, is there really a lump, isn't there a lump? Some days I thought there was, other days I thought maybe not. But in the end, I just had to know for sure. I made an appointment with the doctors. Now, unfortunately, that took 3 appointments before anything got done about it, because they didn't have nurses available and all this, that and the other. But when somebody actually took notice, it was shock horror. Yes, you have got a lump. Within 2 weeks, I was in hospital having surgery. That was my first big hurdle because I didn't want to be disfigured by surgery and scarring. But I got over that. It was a bit unpleasant. Me not wanting to sit down and not do anything. I had my surgery on the Thursday and decided to cut the grass on the Saturday. But my body said that wasn't a good idea. So I spent a week then not being very well at all. But then I paced myself a bit better from there on. Then I started with the chemotherapy. That wasn't as bad as I'd feared it to be, because chemotherapy, everybody goes, oh, shock horror, you know, it's just one of those buzzwords. But for me, they said, because I'd started out so fit and healthy anyway, it took longer for the chemo to actually get me down. So it wasn't until my last 2 cycles that I actually started being sick when I was given the chemo and after I'd had the chemo. So I deem I was quite lucky with that. The next big hurdle for me though was losing my hair. We knew it was going to happen. Went to a friend's house because her mum was having a birthday party. I was helping to set up the food and everything, and suddenly noticed that my hair was everywhere. It was on the worktops, it was on the floor, and it was like, what do I do now? So went home and said to my girls, can't hack this, can't cope with this, so let's cut my hair off into a short bob.
Yeah.
So that's what we did that day. 2 days later, we cut it into just a short cut. And then a couple of days after that, we shaved it all off. Because I said I couldn't cope with it keep coming out all the time and being everywhere. I just had to take control of it and get rid of it. I was really fortunate because I was told to go and see Michael in Nottingham, and got my wigs from him. And that's what allowed me to get through it, because I couldn't have worn the bandanas or just had a bald head. So to be able to put my hair on whenever I was going out was brilliant. And I still do it now because it's so much quicker and easier than having to style your own hair. And it's always perfect.
Did anybody give you advice, on how to handle that period? Because there's obviously advice regarding wigs and other things that you can use to help, but not necessarily in that early period, what to anticipate and what to do. Or did you just use your own instinct? You felt this was the way to handle it?
I've always had to be in control of it, in charge of it. So I read all the leaflets that were given to me, went into Nottingham and went to the various different places that were recommended to get wigs. And then I went with the one that I felt most comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that was Michael, because he just talked to me as a human being. Because you go by private appointment, there's only you there. Some of the others were more like hair salons, so there were other people, and I didn't really want that. So doing it that way was really good, really nice. Maggie's at City Hospital, they were very good as well. But that was funny because when I went there, just to see what it was all about, what was going off, sat having a cup of tea, and there was a man there, and he'd got prostate cancer, and he was struggling. So he'd gone to see Kate, but Kate was busy. So she said she'd get to him as soon as she could. But while we were waiting, we had a cup of tea, a couple of biscuits and chatting to him and that. Kate came free and she said, right, okay, we can have a chat now. And he said, oh no, it's all right. He said, I've just spoken to your colleague and I feel so much better. And I was like, no, I'm not a colleague. I'm in the same boat as you are.
That might show you the power of that peer support, speaking to somebody else who's going through it, whether you know exactly what they're going through or not. It can be quite powerful, so you don't feel on your own as much, and you feel somebody's on your wavelength and somebody's giving you experience that, they've gone through, benefits that they've seen that have helped them.
And for me, it helps to talk about it, because if I keep it in my head, it just becomes a tangled mess that I don't know what to do with. But if I talk, sometimes something that I've been fretting about can become trivial when I actually say it. But while it's in my head, it just seems massive.
One thing you didn't mention yet in too much detail, but I'm sure viewers will be interested, is about the surgery itself. What did they have to do, and were you satisfied with the result overall?
Because the lump was quite large, there was quite a big piece taken. So there's quite a big scar, quite a lot of stitching up. They had to move the nipple so that it was back in line again, because of how much they'd taken away. My surgeon, he was thrilled to bits at what he'd been able to achieve for me, but it took me a while to be able to see this transformation from what I'd had previously to what I'd now got to be as good as he was seeing it. And yes, I can now see that he's done an amazing job compared to how he could have left me. The scar's a nice line, it's not all jagged. But when you've had surgery and something's changed so dramatically, you just don't look at it as being good initially until other people point out to you that, that actually does look fine.
What did you tell me earlier about the position of the nipple and how that was achieved?
He had to remove the nipple because he took such a lot out the side. It meant it was looking towards the left instead of looking forward. So he put it back so it was looking forward. So when you look straight at me, everything looks fine. You wouldn't actually know that I'd had surgery now.
And what was your experience on the ward like? Did you find the nurses accommodating, or was it a positive environment?
Yes, it all seemed very quick because I was only in for the day. So I went in at 8 in the morning and I was operated on by, I think it was about 8:45. So by the time that I was fully awake and determined to have something to eat, because they'd said as soon as I'd eaten I could go home. So even though I didn't want to eat, I thought, I'm going to do this. So I was home by mid-afternoon. So most of my time spent on the ward. They were lovely. I was quite groggy, so I wasn't really properly with it. But yeah, it was fine.
You told me you tried to personalise the experience a bit in terms of what you were wearing.
I did when I had my radiotherapy, because you get to take that gown home because you've got it every day for 3 weeks. And the whole thing just seems a bit sterile and boring, so I wanted to jazz it up a bit. So I embroidered a smiley face and my name onto my gown, so I was different to everybody else anyway.
How did you find your radiotherapy overall?
That was okay. It's the one set of appointments I've had where you always get in on time.
Yeah.
The staff on the radiotherapy, they are lovely. They've got no end of time for you. Everything runs to time, but they've got time to talk to you. They're never rushing you because you are laid in quite an awkward position sometimes. I think the tattoo marks that you have could be a bit more interesting instead of just dots. But you get 2 tattoos for life out of it anyway. But no, the radiotherapy wasn't bad at all. I think it was the travelling that was more tiring than the radiotherapy itself, having to go there and back every day.
So looking at the 3 major treatments, the surgery, the chemotherapy and the radiotherapy, how do you think your body recovered from that? How long do you think it took before you started to feel, it's me again, you know, I can do things again?
It didn't take very long initially after it all before I felt like me again and was doing a lot of things that I'd done before. But like they had told me with the radiotherapy, unfortunately its side effects can kick in a long time afterwards. So I'm feeling a lot better now, but I have gone through a period of feeling really tired and suffering a lot of fatigue because of it. But now, instead of being annoyed with myself that I can't get things done or feel tired, if I'm tired, I'll sit down and go to sleep because I know after 20 minutes of sleep, I can feel so much better. So I don't fight it anymore, where previously I thought I was just being lazy and should be getting on with things. But no, sleeping is far more beneficial because that's what your body's telling you need.
Initially, when you were tired and you were resting, did you recuperate from the rest, or were you almost constantly fatigued? Because that recuperation, if your body can recharge, that helps a lot, but it's not necessarily there from the beginning.
If I had a sleep, before the sleep, I could be struggling to keep my eyes open. But once I had my sleep, I would wake up and feel refreshed and that I could do things again. So it was really like having an afternoon nap like a child would that I sort of got into the habit of doing. So then I could do everything else I wanted. I still had my Halloween parties, my Christmas parties, my New Year's Eve parties because I had my sleep in the day. So I charged my batteries up for the night time.
And did there ever come a time when that became a problem, where the daytime need to rest interfered with the day, or conversely, interfered with your sleep at night?
Never interfered with my sleep at night. That was the one thing I was worried about, sleeping in the day initially. And I'm extremely lucky because my girls are brilliant. So if I needed to sleep and there was still washing up or washing to be done or anything, then while I was sleeping, they would get on with doing it.
Yeah.
So it's always almost worth going to sleep because you get your jobs done.
Other than fatigue, were there any other problems that you were struggling with in that recovery and rehabilitation period?
No, I think it was just mainly feeling tired. The other thing was as well, when I went back to work after it all, I hadn't realised what a tiny bubble I'd lived in. And I've always worked from being, 12, I've always had a job of some form or another and worked full time. So initially I was quite scared of being off work because I thought, what am I going to do with myself? But the time spent with my girls when they came in and out from college and school was lovely because it was time I hadn't had previously because of working so much. But then when it came time to go back to work, it was a bit, hadn't realised that I only had about half a dozen people in my world. And because of the job I do, I'm loading lorries, so I'm meeting lots of different people. So I'd got to go back to work where nobody knew what was wrong with me, why I'd been off for 9 months, and just act as normal again. It was weird as well, because the person that I trained to do my job while I was off then had to retrain me back into my job again. And it was quite scary initially, being able to keep up with that pace during the day, because I hadn't realised how many gears I'd gone down through being off work. But I did it in 2 days and then 3 days. And it didn't take long before I was back to what I could do previously and thoroughly enjoying the interaction with other people again. But it did highlight that your world gets very small for that period of time.
How did you know when the time was right to go back to work?
I'd started to get bored at home. I'd started wanting to speak to different people, see different people. I'd bored everybody in the supermarket by talking to them as I was going round and when they were checking my shopping through, and I'd done various camping activities and things with my girls, but I needed a wider range of people to be talking to because that's what I'd been used to before. And I guess because I wasn't so tired, I needed that. While I was tired, I couldn't be bothered with more than half a dozen people. But once that tiredness started to ease, I needed more people to bore instead of just the odd ones.
You do quite a physical job, don't you? Do you want to say to the viewers what it is you actually do? Because I think some will be surprised.
I work in a quarry and I load lorries with sand and gravel. So if there's any spills on the weighbridge, then that means shoveling the gravel up and keeping everywhere clean and tidy. So yeah, it is quite physical, hence how I went into my chemotherapy quite fit and healthy.
Yeah.
And it has helped me because I do such a physical job. Before I went back to work, I went back to the gym. So I built my level of fitness and stamina up as far as I could before I returned to work, because work were very good at not expecting me to do the shoveling. But me being me, I didn't want to just sit on the sidelines and not do it. And because I was wanting to appear as normal as I was before I stopped work, I needed to be out there shoveling when I could.
Yeah, you wanted to go back and give your all and do the role that you'd previously done.
Yeah, I wanted to be me again. And by doing what I did before was going back to being me.
So one test of that is, how do your colleagues react to you when you go back to the workplace?
They were brilliant. They were obviously thrilled to bits to see me back again. They'd not had anybody getting on to them the same as I normally do, and my strange sense of humour at times. It's like with the gown with the radiotherapy. The other day, it had been rough couple of weeks, so I decided we'd have a happy day. So I had all smiley faces stuck to the window and a poster saying I'm happy today because I can be. And I guess they'd missed that quirkiness that's always around me.
What did you decide in terms of what you should tell them? Did you want to not say very much so that you could still be the same person without any prejudice, let's say? Or did you want them to be informed so that if anything went wrong, or if you needed to take any time off, they knew what was going on?
I didn't want people to know, because my main aim throughout it all is I wanted Sue's friends. I didn't want Cancer Sue's friends, so I didn't want people just being friends with me or nice to me because they felt sorry for me. I wanted them to be genuine and just see me, not see the cancer. So they don't know. I guess they speculate and guess what's been wrong with me, but they're not allowed to mention it, and they have all treated me exactly the same as they did before I went off work, which is what I enjoy, because I don't want it to come between me and the people I mix with.
Do you think people might have treated you differently if you'd have told them?
I definitely think they would, yes, because I work in a very male environment. So if they'd known I'd had breast cancer, that would be quite difficult for them to deal with and process as to, do we mention it, do we not mention it, how do we treat her from now, can she shovel, shouldn't she shovel? So it allows me to decide what I do and don't do, because they're understanding, they're funny. I shovel until the bloke stops shoveling, then do 2 more shovels. Now you see them purposely stopping shoveling early so that it doesn't force me to keep shoveling. So they're allowing me to be me, but you can still see that there's consideration for how it must be hard for me now.
And as an employer, did the employer as a whole, were they accommodating in terms of advice and being flexible, that kind of thing?
Yes, they were very good. Fortunately, I have full sick pay, and then we have an enhanced insurance scheme that I went on to after the 6 months full pay. Then when I was due to go back to work, we had discussions. I went back 2 days a week, then 3 days a week, and then up to 4 days a week, which is what I'm still doing now, which gives me a break on a Wednesday. So I only work 2 days before I get a break, another 2 days, and then it's weekend, which allows me to get that sleep that I need. Sometimes Wednesdays are only about sleeping and catching up on soaps. Other times I'll go and see friends. It all depends how I feel on a Wednesday as to what I use Wednesdays for.
And I was going to ask you, what about the energy and fatigue you mentioned earlier? Did that ever become a problem at work? Because presumably it was hard to catch up on that rest in the day.
The energy and fatigue wasn't too bad because initially I didn't go out and shovel. What I found hard to deal with was my emotions, because I will cry quite easily. And I'm terrible. If people are nice to me, that gets to me that they're caring and understanding. So although they didn't know what was wrong with me, all the drivers were absolutely lovely in saying how good it was to see me back, and I'd burst into tears and they were like, oh, that wasn't meant to happen. And they'd bring cakes and things in for me, and then I'd burst into tears. So it was that fine edge of bursting into tears all the time. And I couldn't tell you why I did that, other than the fact that it was so lovely that people cared. Even though they didn't know, they still cared.
And
so that was difficult to begin with, not wanting to burst into tears all the time. But that eased as I got used to being back to work.
Sue, I want to ask you whether everything just kind of went along without any, hiccups, or were there anything? Did anything untoward happen in the cancer journey?
Yes, I started to become aware that I was banging my head. I'd be cleaning the bath, and the shower screen that's always been there, I'd start hitting my head on it. If I opened a cupboard door, I'd hit my head on the cupboard door. And all sorts of little things like that, I'd be banging my head. I didn't appear to be judging distance properly. So the next time I saw my oncologist, because I was still seeing her monthly, I think it was, perhaps even more frequent than that. And I mentioned to her that was happening, and she said they'd get me in straight away for a CT scan. And the CT scan showed up that there was something in my head. I then went on to have an MRI scan, and that has shown that, as they see it at the moment, it isn't secondary, it isn't cancerous, it's just benign. And for now they're monitoring it to see if it grows, if it continues to grow, if it stops, or what happens with it.
So you had a period then when you had these worrying symptoms. The CT scan seemed to show a further concern, which could have been an advanced progression of the cancer, a metastasis they call it, don't they?
Yes.
But then later on, you received on the MRI more information that showed it wasn't a secondary spread.
Yes.
It was actually an independent condition.
Yes.
I think you told me earlier, a meningioma potentially.
That's it.
So my question for you then is, going through that very difficult kind of ups and downs, what was it like during that period where things were very uncertain and you thought that things were progressing suddenly quite fast?
It was horrible. It was absolutely awful. But I just had to take control of the situation and think, right, what do we do now? We have our post-it notes on the cupboard doors in the kitchen, which is our bucket list of things we want to do. And the things we want to do aren't big things like having to go and see the pyramids or anything like that. It's like having an ice cream day where we eat ice cream all day and nothing else. So our bucket list are just things that make us laugh. Having a barbecue where we all have to wear silly hats and things like that. So although it was horrible, it was an awful time, and when I was on my own, I'd dwell on it. Most of my time, I tried to make every day special, and we did things on the days that were fun. We did pottery, we threw pots. My girls and my friend went with us. We did as many things as we could so that we just had fun times. So it just took our minds off that if there was only a short period of time, we would have enjoyed it as much as we possibly could. There'd be no way that we'd look back and say, we wasted that just sitting and moping about it. We just got on and did things.
So already within a short space of time of having potentially further bad news, as they call it, more serious, more progressive disease, you had almost come to terms with it? Is that a fair way of putting it? In other words, you decided to approach it in a way that you approach a lot of things, which is to take control, to be more in charge, to still appreciate life, to maximize what you're doing rather than necessarily give up.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's dealing with it, it's taking charge of it. It's not my thing that I always say with pain or anything that's going off, it's a steamroller behind me. And if I stop, that steamroller is going to go over me. And there's no way I'm going to let the steamroller get me. So by doing and arranging fun and exciting things, crazy things that we do, it stops the steamroller because it can't catch up with me, and it doesn't know what I'm up to all the time either. So
that's a good way of putting it.
So we do some crazy things. It's like with our camping. We have our inflatable settees and everything. So everybody laughs at us that it's not proper camping. And we moved on from the inflatable settees that now we have to take an inflatable animal and they hang from the gazebo. So we're always doing very simple, but things that make everybody laugh.
What was the situation going to be financially if things were progressing that fast?
Financially, for me, I'm very lucky with the company I work for. Because I get 8 times my salary death in service, it was going to leave my girls in a very strong position financially because they'd get the house and they'd get 8 years of my salary. So for 8 years, technically, they'd be all right. The company I work for, again, are brilliant because they paid for a financial advisor who advised that the money in the house will go into trust. So the girls don't actually own any of it. The trust does. So they can't just fritter it away. They're going to have to wait to be able to actually get any of that money. But the money will give them an allowance because they're both doing degrees and things like that at the moment. It would give them an allowance so they don't have to take up full-time jobs. But my brother's trustee over that. So they couldn't just say, we fancy a holiday in the Bahamas and take it out the trust, because they'd have to speak to my brother who'd probably say, no, you'll have to have a holiday in Yarmouth or somewhere. But their financial position would be very good, which I'm lucky with.
Nevertheless, it must have been also a very anxiety-provoking time for the girls.
Yeah.
Did that come out emotionally at home?
We sat and talked a lot. It's something we've always done. If any of us have got an issue, we always sit at the kitchen table and deal with it. The 3 of us do. We've always done that. When they were at school, if they had issues, I would give them the tools to deal with it. When they got to the point they couldn't, then I'd go into school and sort it. I had issues at work once, and they sat me down at the kitchen table and said, right, these are the tools to deal with it, and if it doesn't pack in, we'll be going to see your boss. So we talk very openly. We don't have secrets. So the girls, because they knew exactly what was going off with me all the time, they didn't have that unknown fear. And because when we talked about it and I said, I'm doing things about it, we're doing the best we can, for my girls, I've always been very positive and said, you know, we're going to get the better of this. We're going to sort it one way or another. So we just basically talk about it, I suppose, and deal with any problems either of us, any of us have got.
And how do you think they're doing now on reflection? I mean, I know it's turned out that probably there isn't quite as much to worry about. How are they doing in general?
I think they're doing brilliantly. I think they're coping really well with it. They seem really happy. One of them's got a placement to do early years educator come September. The other one's going to do a degree course starting in September. I've been very lucky because out of this, they were in the midst of exams and everything. The eldest has come out with her A-levels, she's got them. The youngest has come out with a triple distinction merit for what she was doing. And to have done that and be under the pressure they must have felt at times, I think is just amazing. But my girls are extremely close, so even if they didn't feel they could talk to me, they would always talk to each other and support each other. So with doing their college work and that, they wouldn't necessarily come to me. A-level maths is over my head anyway because it's letters instead of numbers. So they wouldn't worry me with that, but they'd talk to each other about it and deal with it that way.
What was the reaction of extended family and friends to what was going on?
They, a lot of them, my sister-in-law and my friend in particular, have said that if they were diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, because of how they've seen me deal with it, they wouldn't be as scared.
Wow.
They wouldn't see it as such a frightening thing anymore because I've never tried to make it a big thing. It's an illness that I'm going to either get over or I'm going to live with. I've not just sat and been distraught about it all the time. And they found that very positive and very powerful for them to deal with anything they come up against.
Yeah, that's a very important message. If you can have an effect on somebody else, that means they're more able to deal with something that's a big threat in society more positively in the future. That's fantastic. A critical time when you're coping with cancer is about going out, how comfortable you feel, your image, the reaction of others. One of the underlying questions there is, do you think there's still an attitude or a stigma in society which sometimes can be unhelpful?
Yes, definitely. Because people are so scared of cancer and don't know how to deal with it themselves, it's like some people can't even say the word. They have to give it a name instead of saying cancer, as if, like in Beetlejuice, saying it 3 times, you're going to get it. And that's almost how people feel. So I think they feel uncomfortable around people who've got cancer because they don't know what to talk to them about, how to be with them. They think they've got to be different with them for some reason. So I didn't want to do anything that said without a doubt, that is what I'd got. So rather than wearing like bandanas and that, I've always had quirky hats and I've had my wigs and anything that's a bit daft. So the first thought of somebody looking at me isn't, has she got cancer? It's, is she crazy? And I do think it's the adults that struggle with it.
Yes.
Children don't struggle with it the same. The children aren't scared to ask you the questions. And I know when I was first diagnosed, and my friend's little boy, Callister, and he said to me, cancer really doesn't know what it's been doing getting you, does it? Because you can be quite nasty. And that's just lovely. That's just saying it how it is. But adults can't say that. They struggle with it.
Yeah, that's a very touching little story there. And what did that mean longer term then for going back into society, not just at work, but going out in general? You know, if you're wearing a wig, do you eventually get comfortable wearing a wig with that image? Do people accept that, you know, in terms of their reactions?
And people know when I'm wearing a wig?
Well, yeah, in a way. Do they notice a change in you? You know, sometimes people notice a change, like a change in hair, change in colour, as much as about you, you know, internally. They're not really monitoring that, if you know what I mean.
Because I went into this small bubble, there were only the immediate people who knew what was wrong with me, who saw me for those few months. So when there was a change in my hair afterwards, I've always changed my hairstyle. 1 minute it'll be long and blonde, and the next minute it'll be short and black. So for me to come out with a totally different hairstyle didn't actually faze people, because that's the sort of thing I do. So I was quite lucky with that I spent several months only with the people who were close to me. So then when I stepped out into the outside world, they accepted the change. The hats I used because I've got 2 dogs, so I had to go out and walk my dogs. So the hats, people would think I've got my hair tucked up inside my hat. They weren't aware that I hadn't got hair at that point.
Do you think anything positive can come out of the cancer journey, even though it's feared in society and obviously nobody wants that diagnosis, but once you've had it, can something positive come out of it?
For me, having cancer has been very positive, because instead of missing days, weeks of my life, I now make every day count. I now look at what makes me happy and aim to do the things and mix with the people that make me happy. So it's made me be able to make my life a lot better. Without cancer, I could have got run over by a bus and missed half my life. But because I've had cancer, I've readdressed my life. I'm now going to do the things that I want to do, whether people think they're daft, crazy, whatever. As long as it's not hurting them, I don't see why I can't do crazy things. So for me, it's been positive.
One of the most important things to ask you is what in general helps and what in your life is around that you find a positive. You talked about the family, your daughters obviously, but have you got anything else around that helps?
Yes, we have a lot of animals. We have cats, dogs, guinea pigs, rabbits, and we have a parrot. And they just know. It is so uncanny how they know. The dog isn't allowed on the settee, but when I've had naps in the afternoon, I'll wake up to her laid on me. And they've always got that time to just sit with you and listen to you. When you think nobody else wants to listen, they do. An African grey is a must, because he talks to you. So
that's the type of parrot, is it?
Yes, it is. Yes, that's the parrot. So he is lovely, because in my darkest moments, when Alfie says, "I love you," that is just brilliant. So it's just having the little things, and especially seeing them, because what I also do is I keep a happiness journal. So I write down what has made me happy in a day. Now, we remember everything that's made us unhappy in the day. Somebody who's cut you up in traffic, somebody who hasn't said thank you when you've held a door open, but you don't see the things that have made you happy. So I'll write in my journal, somebody's held a door open for me, somebody said my hair looks nice. We get the drivers come in and they give me sweets or chocolate bars, and I write all those things down, because they're all things that make you happy, but you miss them so easily if you're not careful. So every day I make a point at the end of the day of thinking back through my day and thinking, what good things happened today? And it is surprising how many there are, because you don't think they're there unless you look for them sometimes.
That's definitely a good tip for other people. Along those lines, if we had a new patient watching this who was at the beginning of your journey, or even if it was you back then, you were talking to the old you, if you like, what would you say now to help them along with that?
It is about finding things to make you happy. It is about taking control of the situation. Right at the very beginning when I was having my surgery, everybody wants to buy you flowers. I love flowers, but they die and I'm on a journey. So I have a nomination bracelet so people can buy me a link for my bracelet that relates to the journey I'm on. So I have that bracelet all the time. Even after the flowers would have died, I've still got the links on my bracelet. And it is about just enjoying every single day, seeing the good in every situation, because there is good there, but we get too wrapped up with the doom and gloom on the news and start to only see the horrible stuff. It's like with my journal I keep. In my journal, I've discovered I love gluing and sticking. So I will do pictures of what I'm aiming for. So if I'm aiming for a holiday or something new in the living room, a new design in the living room, I put the pictures in my journal to help me visualise what I want. And just the cutting out and gluing and sticking is fun in itself.
You told me you also had some funny ways of dealing with things, and I remember you saying about how you dealt with the time when the cancer looked progressive with the children. What was the story there?
We went back to get results, and I'd said to them that we wouldn't deal with the results on that day, whatever they were. We got the results and we went off to have something to eat. Then we were going to Laser Quest. And then when we got home, because of my friends in my head and we weren't sure how good or bad the diagnosis were going to be, we were going to make sure that they couldn't multiply, they couldn't do anything else. So the one way to do that is tinfoil, obviously. So we all had tinfoil hats so that the friends in my head would know that you're not going to mess with us because we have our hats on.
That's brilliant. Where do you see the future for yourself? And what is your coping style when looking towards the future?
I only look forward in small chunks. I don't look too far forward. Partly not wanting to tempt fate. When I had the secondary scare, that was a horrible freefall feeling. So long as I just deal with a day at a time or a week at a time and plan the week out as to what I'm going to do, still find it quite scary to plan something for a year's time, but planning for a week or a month, I can do that. And I can cope with doing that, and that's how I deal with the future at the moment.
Sometimes it's nerve-wracking to look at the future, isn't it, when you're not certain about it? But it seems to me you're still managing to look far enough ahead to do positives, to look forward to things that are meaningful, i.e. small things that might keep you going. Do you think it's important to do that?
Yes, I love organising things and things come into fruition. We've always done a lot of camping and we went to Sherwood Forest a couple of years ago now. And for me, just being my friend, my two girls, her two boys, we stepped back and we'd taken food and prepared a meal for 17 people. And we just stepped back and we were like, wow, we did that, we pulled that off. So it is organising things, giving yourself something that you're working towards all the time. Like I say, I can only do it so many months ahead, but that's me saying, well, I'm still going to be here in 3 months' time because I've got that to do. I've got that to look forward to. So that's how I cope with it, by keeping myself relatively active, organising, thinking about things to do. We camped in Helen's back garden the other day because we haven't camped much this year. So it's just doing silly things that just make you laugh.
Did you always do those, or has that changed since your diagnosis?
We've always done things like that, but since my diagnosis, we've stepped the pace up with it. We keep it going continually instead of having a lapse of 6 months of doing nothing. Now we've always got something on the go, something we're looking forward to next.
Well, I think you've got a really brilliant attitude to coping with a serious illness, and I think if people can take a little bit from what you say, then they will be in a better position. So I want to thank you for coming in today. I think it's a really amazing story. I know you've had ups and downs and things haven't always been totally certain, but I wish you all the best, and thanks again for coming in.
Thank you.